No niin, hyvää iltaa ja tervetuloa tänne Itäkeskuksen kirjastoon. Good evening everybody and welcome here to the Itäkeskus Library. Minä olen Liisa Uimonen, olen töissä täällä Itäkeskuksen kirjastossa ja mä olen saanut kunnian avata tämän tilaisuuden. I am Liisa Uimonen, I work as a librarian here and I have the honor to open this event. Äänessä ympäristökriisin eturintama tapahtumassa keskustelevat Christine Kandi, Julius Bhatia, he ovat siis kumpikin Keniasta, Hakan Shifchi Kurdistanista ja Niila-Juhan Valkeapää Saamenmaalta. Keskustelua fasilitoi Teppo Eskelinen ja tämä tullaan käymään kokonaisuudessaan englannin kielellä. Tapahtuman järjestää Elokapina yhdessä Siemenpuusäätiön ja Suomen Lähetysseuran ja Itäkeskuksen kirjaston kanssa. Keskustelun lopuksi tullaan myös kuulemaan tulevista tapahtumista. In this event, Voices from the Frontiers of Environmental Crisis, we hear from Christine Kandi and Julius Bhatia from Kenya, Hakan Shifchi from Kurdistan and Niila-Juhan Valkeapää from Samiland. Welcome you all. The discussion will be in English and it's facilitated by Teppo Eskelinen. The event is organized by Extinction Rebellion Finland and in cooperation with Siemenpuu Foundation, Finnish Evangelical Lutheran Mission and Itäkeskus Library. After the panel discussion, we also hear about coming events by Extinction Rebellion and maybe some other events as well. Tässä tapahtumassa noudatamme turvallisemman tilan periaatteita. Älä oleta, ole kunnioittava, anna tilaa, älä häiritse. Ja jos kaipaat ongelmatilaisiin apua tai tukea, pyydä sitä. Meillä on täällä paikalla 2 häirintätukihenkilöä, löytyy tuolta takanurkasta. Heillä on liivit päällä. Heidän puoleen voi kääntyä, jos kokee minkäänlaista häirintää tai muuten turvattomia tilanteita. In this event, we follow the principles of a safer space. Don't assume, be respectful, give space, do not disturb, and if you need help or support in problem situations, ask for it. We have 2 contact persons here in the corner to whom you can turn in case of any harassment or otherwise unsafe situations. Now, is there anybody who needs... Kysytään mieluummin ehkä suomeksi. Onko täällä ketään paikalla, joka kokee tarvitsevansa tulkkausta englannista suomeksi? Kaikki pystyy seuraamaan englanninkielistä keskustelua. Okei. Hyvä niin. So no translation needed. And now I give the word to our facilitator. Welcome all and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. We are ready to begin the discussion on the indigenous and global south perspectives and solutions to the environmental crisis. As introduced, my name is Teppo Eskelinen. I will be facilitating this discussion. And we have 4 excellent speakers, and I will let them introduce themselves in a minute. Just to say something general about the topic of the discussion of today. We talk a lot about the environmental crisis, but it seems that sometimes we are not talking about the same phenomenon, or at least from the same perspective. It is for us in the urban global north too easy to view the environmental crisis in terms of an abstract phenomenon which relates to some distant future or abstract ideas of justice. Whereas for many peoples of the global south, of the indigenous people, the environmental crisis is a lot more acute and pressing and more urgent, and also there are lots of experiences on organizing that might be instructive for us. So with this general framing, we have decided to organize this discussion we call discussion on the frontiers of the economic crisis, the environmental crisis. So this is exactly a frontier thing, frontiers of environmental destruction, frontiers of resistance to that destruction. So to say no more at this point, I will give the opportunity for everyone to talk for about 5 minutes to begin the discussion on their particular perspective. So I'd like you to introduce yourself, perhaps say a few words about your background, organization, your particular perspective on these themes. How do you, in your activist or political work, relate to the environmental crisis, its realities, or organizing in response? So just for technical remarks before that, first, as noted, no one requested translation to Finnish, but it doesn't mean that everyone understands English perfectly. So please be as clear as possible when you talk. The other thing is that Julius has to leave in 1 hour, and to enable him to be able to say what's on his mind, I will give some more possibilities for him to speak during that hour. So as everyone is using 5 minutes in their first, for their first comments, you're welcome to use 10 if you wish. Right. But we might as well go in order and begin with Hakan, please.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you for the organizers, to organizing this event, and also for inviting us to discuss this topic, because in the latest years this topic is becoming much more in the focus in parallel to many other global crises. So in Kurdistan we are also working a lot to get some answers and solutions for the environmental crisis in Kurdistan. My name is Hakan Çiftçi. I'm a member of International Relations Committee of Kurdistan National Congress. And Kurdistan National Congress has been existed for 25 years. We consist of different organizations, political parties, and individuals who are working to unify the Kurdish people, all parts of Kurdistan, to work together for a framework for the solutions in Kurdistan. And the diaspora, the Kurdish diaspora, we are working a lot with the lobby, because there is a lot of information going on in the mainstream which is not exactly accurate or authentic. So we are gathering a lot of reports from the ground. And with these reports, we are gathering a summary about what's going on in Kurdistan. And the latest 5-6 years, the Committee for Ecology are in the process of research, in the process of discussions to address what is the result of the war situation in Kurdistan. And one of the results of the war situation in Kurdistan, in Turkey, Iran, Iraq, and Syria, it is the destruction of the environment, which causes that people have to displace, which causes that people have to leave their places. As I'm speaking right now, there is, for example, chemical bombings by the Turkish army in a lot of the regions, and we have a lot of evidences on that. And we are bringing a lot of different organizations, but also expertise from other parts of the world to address how we can solve this environmental issues, but also how we can overcome the challenges we are having right now, because there's an embargo in Kurdistan. So I think I can start with that and leave to the questions.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me here, and most importantly, bringing my voice all the way from Kenya, from indigenous community. I'm Christine Kandie is my name, and I am from Endorois community. And today, I'm not only bringing forward voices of Endorois community, but other indigenous community in Kenya, and maybe most importantly in East Africa. In terms of crisis we are facing in Eastern Africa and in Endorois community include issues to do with environmental destruction, clearance of our indigenous forests. We have invasion from conservation farms. Most of them are from northern part, and they are doing this work with the government, and this has led to eviction of indigenous people from their ancestral land, and people who are mostly impacted by this action are women and people with disability, who's often, when it comes to negotiation and bringing forward their voices into important discussion at UNFCCC or any other like COP29 or any other international discussion that needs to consider their voices, we continue to face serious marginalization, and we continue to, our voices, we have been left to battle with consequences of climate change. At the beginning of this month, those areas that I've mentioned, for the last 4 years, there was an acute issues to do with drought, that there was no rainfall, and then all of a sudden, at the beginning of the month, we experienced, that rains that ravaged our area, and it brought a lot of destruction. And I think these are the issues when we are talking about climate change impact. Those are the indicators to show us that at the moment, people with disability and even indigenous community are vulnerable to impacts of climate change, and signs such as flooding and rising temperatures contribute to environmental destruction. As a community, we are trying to organize ourselves around those by mobilizing our efforts, mobilizing youth to be part and parcel of those important conversations, although those conversations happen in closed room. So I've come here because we work closely with Chairman Poo Foundation in environmental protection and even natural resource governance, and they are the one who facilitated my attendance into this. So thank you, and I look forward to sharing more experiences from East Africa. Thank you.
Boris, my name is Nila Johan Valkapa, and I'm a Sápmi from Finland. I've mostly grown up in Helsinki, but my roots go to Karesuando, which is like the arm of Finland. And I'm a board member or secretary of the Finnish Sápmi Youth Association. And as this is an international audience to some level, I feel I need to clarify what the Sápmi means. So we are indigenous peoples from the North Europe, from Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. Yeah. Okay, I will continue. Maybe you can say something first.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I hope you're doing well. My name is Julius Mbatia. I am privileged to share this stage with all of you and also to speak to all of you. I came to Finland last week on Wednesday, and under the invitation of FELM, I realized that indeed there's a common message that we can speak both across regions, across communities, and that common message has to be articulated by what we call voices. So my work involves a lot of climate policy and governance engagement. I'm a specialist in that. And the reason why we talk about voices is because these voices have to speak hope. These voices have to speak truth to power. And these voices have to speak about the vision we share now and for the future. And if you think about the realities of the contexts we live in at the moment, so you understand that we are in a planetary emergency, not because we would just want to say it that way, but because it's lived experiences drawn from the people who are living on the front lines. And we all of us share one Earth. There's no other planet. And since we are on this universe together, whatever happens in this part of the world affects the other part of the world and vice versa. And if you look at statistics, the last decade, we are doing poorly in taking care of the Earth, in making sure that people and the planet coexist in a way that adds value, one, but also in a way that respects what we call planetary boundaries. 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries we talk about have now been exceeded. And one of that planetary boundary is climate change. And we are at a point where catastrophic climate impacts are hitting the world, are hitting communities. And if you think about differentiation, then those who are not at the same level as us, particularly from developed countries, for example, or countries with the capability, financial capability, technical capability, and technological capabilities are suffering the most. And this is the reality of the climate discourse, that we will not suffer the same fate together, unfortunately, however much we are in the same earth. It's the same reality also with the planetary crisis and emergency, that those who are poor, those who have least contributed to the problem continue to suffer the most because of structural and systemic marginalization and lack of power and agency on the part of those who can also do much. And I would promise you that we also talk about cooperation back at home. So we don't see it as a question of who needs to do what more than who, within what context, but we also see as one responsibility, a shared earth, a shared universe. And that's why from most of the experiences you'll hear on this stage, communities are actually trying to do something. And so when we want to put each other to task about how much we need to do for the environment, for the planet, for biodiversity, for animals, for people, then we realize that all of us can do something. And that's why voices matter. So voices matter to complement each other. Voices matter to strengthen each other's agency in getting what we call justice for the earth, justice for the people on the front lines, and justice for all of us. Because if this earth sinks, we sink with it together. And that is why then this conversation is crucial. And in my day-to-day life, what I look at then is the geopolitics of taking action. So why is it that we are seeing no action as needed? We all of us talk about climate ambition, yet when we act in our day-to-day lives, when commitments are made, when decisions are made, they fall short of the much-needed ambition. By 2030, we know that we might be crossing a red line that we will never come back from. And we know very well that the scientists have said it. At the moment, we are warming at about 2.7 degrees, and we need to keep to 1.5 by 2030. So what do we do about it? And are we going to get lost in the conflicts of power around fossil fuels, or are we actually going to do something about it? And these are very severe questions that communities back at home keep on asking. So you talk about climate justice. You go, you mobilize political and public power. Are you seeing any hope in this? And it's always a difficult question, because the next moment they ask you the next question, there's a climate impact hitting at home. Christine just said it. We have had a national flooding that was catastrophic. The floods were in half of the entire country. 232 people lost their lives, actually more than 232 people. More than 18,000 families are living right now in internally displaced camps because their livelihoods and their shelters were drawn away. And this is the question about the climate change crisis and other planetary emergencies, that if it's not affecting you, should it be my concern? Or should it be the concern of the only ones it's affecting? And I hope that this conversation will do justice to these questions, so that we can, all of us, speak one voice, articulate hope as we speak truth to power.
Thank you very much. For a few more words on introducing these diverse backgrounds and diverse political contexts we have here in the panel, I was thinking about the issue of marginalized voices. Julius talked a lot about voices and making voices heard. Now, when we talk about marginalization and marginalized voices, we talk about invisibility, right? So they are voices which are not sufficiently heard by the general public or by the global north or whatever would be your audience of power. So I thought perhaps you could still elaborate a bit on your ideas of what are the voices and messages from your particular communities which you feel are not properly heard. We don't need to be talking even about properly addressing these, but voices which somehow become invisible, or acute circumstances which the world should know more about.
Yes. When you look at the situation in Kurdistan, of course, it's a very complex situation because we are not in a war with one part. There are several parts who are in Kurdistan, many actors who are in Kurdistan, who are involved in a war situation. And many people in different areas, they are working hard to make their voices heard, because the humanitarian crisis they are living in these areas is brutal. For example, when you look at the situation of Rojava, where the canton of Afrin, which is being exploited now, and the Turkish state and a lot of gang forces, the proxy gangs, are exploiting in that area, and a lot of the olive trees in this area are being cut, or the olives have been sold in European countries. And we have tried to get the messages out from the screen from these people, and unfortunately there is a kind of blockage from the mainstream media. And at the same thing, when the infrastructure of Rojava have been bombarded by the Turkish state, where people have very difficulties to access water, where they have difficulties to access to use their own agriculture, where they have difficulties to move because there is different minings in the region. There have been really difficulties to get these voices out and get the support from international communities, because there is always kind of ignoring the conflict in the region. And like I also mentioned in my intervention in the beginning, for example, the chemical bombings in the region, where the local people try to tell the international community, we need them to come and investigate the chemical bombings in these different areas. And they made an application to OMCT. It's an international institution which is working to prevent chemical weapons. And none of the European countries who are member of this organization wanted to go and give an investigation on the suspicious use of chemical weapons, because there is always a kind of other types of actors who are involved, especially companies, in use of chemical weapons, because they are selling these. And we have used a lot of reports from the local area where it can be shown as an evidence, but unfortunately, these voices has not been heard. And the same with the situation of the forest, because, for example, in where you call it northern Iraq, which is southern Kurdistan, thousands of hectares of forests has been destroyed. The trees has been cut down. So there is an high scale of exploitation in the area where natural resources, the access to natural resources, has been a big issue in the region. But unfortunately, even some foreign organizations who are working there and making reports about that had very much difficulties to get it into mainstream media. In Kurdistan, as you know, there is a lot of archaeological investigation or research or analysis which can be answered to a lot of the questions we have in history. Unfortunately, many people have very difficulties to go to the area, and many people who have asked for a solution for this conflict in the region, so this archaeological research can also be made peacefully. This has also been very difficult because of the lot of corporations who are involved in a lot of projects there in Kurdistan. People's voice have been marginalized in the region, especially about for example, in northern Kurdistan, which you know as Turkey, the dam project in one area called Hasankey, for example. In this dam project, a lot of banks and other cooperative companies have been involving to build this dam. And the local people have had a lot of difficulties, and also some international organizations who are working against this kind of dam projects have not been listened, and most of them are feeling that they have been ignored. Where I feel that this will be a more serious problem in the future, because at the end, Kurdistan will end up to become a desert if it continues like that. Because the water supply to the agriculture, the water supply to the trees, with the water supply to the many other areas will create a desert condition in Kurdistan. And this is not something which has been happening just last 10 years. For example, many civil society who have been working to expose the chemical bombing in Kurdistan, for example, the chemical bombing in 1988 in Halabja, had been a result where many people have had not possibility to use that area for decades. And many families had their children born with mutations, for example. And for decades, a lot of the reports which has come from these areas has been also ignored. Unfortunately, there is also a problem for many organizations to enter to Kurdistan, mostly because of the risk zone of the war. Because some people would like to make an investigation, some people would like to implement their own projects in the region which can be helpful for the society. But unfortunately, the hegemonic powers in the region doesn't allow people to reach there. Also, which is also resulting that the scream from these regions, from the people there, is not heard in any way. While we are talking here, there is constant bombing by the drones in Kurdistan. And most of the bombing areas are the areas where also not only civilian targets, but also targets of areas where people can have their own agriculture, areas where people can plant some trees. And this is also becoming a humanitarian crisis situation, which is also evolving to very serious environmental crisis.
So when we talk about missing voices in this international conversation, or even people who are feeling the impact of climate change, we are talking about people with disability that are most often and always appearing in documents as most vulnerable. We are also, in terms of resourcing, including even deliberate resourcing to the organization of persons with disability, we realize that in philanthropic world, we receive the smallest size of resources. So that one adding to existing vulnerability that we always battle with. In terms of capacity, because of our situation and because we've had this historic marginalization over time, and even including even our culture within our customic laws within our society, you realize again we suffer from that double strategy at the same time. Climate change has equally impacted on us, and including even the way our government are doing. For example, in Kenya, the government of Kenya is #1 when it comes to climate carbon credit arrangement, whereby we are told that, you know, in my local community, they say nowadays they've gone further into your lungs. It's no longer about your flesh, it is about your lungs. Because if you are selling the air that you are breathing in and out into, you've taken that one into monetary without even, and even trying to tell us that you are ready to compensate the damage in terms of the losses, the pollution that have gotten into the environment. It means that at some point, it's not about the humanity and even about the mother heart that all of us are living in. We've been carried away by profits and loss that this, you know, that one in itself is not doing justice to ourselves, including even our mother heart. We've had this all time caring for mother heart. In most research that have been taken, it shows that indigenous people are, in terms of their work, even day-to-day work, they are caring the mother heart. Our capacities has been compromised by the impact of climate change. I was talking something on issues to do with carbon credit, which again, people are negotiating in spaces without even our knowledge. And it is very critical for us to participate, because at the end of the day, we are talking about carbon market, carbon credit, and it's targeting us. It targets our indigenous community. What policy are you also pushing this government to give us security for our land, so that when we are engaging with a land that I have the ownership. Right now, I have the ownership because in our indigenous territory, we recognize land ownership because we know it is in us. You know, that element of ownership is always in us. You came up with this element of having a documentary ownership. Of course, we want to oblige, but again, the government does not give us. The process is very lengthy. We want to demonstrate that. Again, discussions are happening in rooms that we cannot access. I've talked about how climate change discussion has taken place, including even in rooms that we have no knowledge about it. But you see, the people who are ready to pay for loss and damages are there are sitting on those tables. And there is this component that I want to bring forward. There is a loss and damage fund that has been established. How do we indigenous people access those? Because currently as a community, and I'm not sure if I introduced the organization that I work in. I work with Endorois Indigenous Women Empowerment Network, and we are leading a loss and damage community-led research, whereby we want to attach some of the suffering that we undergo as a community, both loss of language, loss of culture, spiritual side, and all those. We want to come together and evaluate, including even material damages that we suffer. Now that we have established on that one, where do we take? Is that loss and damage accessible by indigenous community? Because I understand there is an establishment of loss and damage. I understand the other time that they established a board in that. Do we have indigenous representative in those boards? It's not about indigenous. Do we have a person with disability? That is a hard question.
I really feel what you said in the end there about the indigenous people not having a voice in the decision making, and it's a really similar thing in Sápmi. For example, like there's so many mining and wind power and forestry and all the big projects that they're planning on, and they might say that they are listening to the local and indigenous peoples, but then they still don't like really listen. They might say that they have listened, but then there is suddenly some new opinions that even the indigenous people haven't heard. One good example of this is in 2015 they started to build a huge, like 170 windmill, like wind park in Fosen in Norway, without the locals, indigenous people from the area approving it. They built the whole thing without any permissions for it, and in the end the local municipality went to court against the Norwegian state. And the Norwegian state-owned windmill company. In the end, the municipality won, but the Norwegian state or the wind power company didn't do anything. They changed the fact that they're breaking their own law and they're breaking international human rights. And now, 2.5 years later, they have like somewhat a deal on half of the land, that they are paying some compensation for the land that the wind park is using. But at the same time, the wind park is making loads of money on indigenous land, destroying indigenous culture and livelihoods. And the same is happening everywhere, basically.
I would totally agree with what has been shared by the previous speakers. That yes, we have the missing voices. I'd add children to that. I'd add, in addition to indigenous peoples, I'd also add local communities. Communities who are living in marginal areas or very rural areas, who are in one way or another not involved directly, and who the space to even get involved indirectly is very minimal. And then I would also add, and this is very interesting, I'd also add youth. And I'm saying this for one reason, youth and women, and I'm saying this for one reason. While we have had over the years the whole debate around providing space for young people, women, and young girls to be involved in the climate discourse, the biggest question is how that agency is translated, or how those calls are translated into actual opportunities when you come to sitting on the table, when you come to making decisions. And I might be wrong, but my analysis is that even offering the space to participate is just but a very low level entry point. We have to offer these people, these groups of people, one, equal opportunity to access technical knowledge, equal opportunity to understand the prevailing discourses and dialogues, for them to participate meaningfully. And importantly, we must equal the field for everyone to provide solutions that they feel would work in their contexts, in their locality, and marshal the entire financial system, marshal the entire design of portfolios and programming and projects to actually support the aspirations of the people. And I think that's where we are not. And we have quite an uphill task to make sure that in our calls, we don't just look for the missing voices, but we also look for the missing platforms, the missing innovations to get these voices into actual decision making, into actual solution building, into actual representational spaces where they can indeed be part of the required change and forge a common future toward that. And we must talk about how to enable these missing voices overcome their current challenges of engagement. And I want to say this because the climate crisis is coming out to unfold a lot of things that we never knew. We had indigenous people previously struggling for their own national rights, their own human rights within their national contexts. And with the added burden of climate change, then what we are seeing is an increasing marginalization. And what we must speak against is both systemic and structural marginalization, including climate-induced marginalization now. And we have to speak about also the importance of having the voices connected. So we have to connect the youth voice with the women voice. We have to connect the voice of the people with disability with the voice of the indigenous people, with the voice of children. Otherwise, each one of us in the category of the missing groups will be fighting their own struggle and not having a counterpart that they can rely on. So we need to build this, in my own perspective and very, very honest opinion, this circle of safety net within our social groupings, that we are in one struggle and that this struggle has no better positioned person than the other, that all of us are marginalized or discriminated or regarded lowly by either laws and policy frameworks and policy processes and governments, and therefore we must together acknowledge that we are the only ones in a connected nature that can bring about the change we desire within the context of addressing the planetary crisis.
Thank you very much. Now, Julius talked about connections. Let us elaborate a bit on this notion. Now, this is a fascinatingly diverse panel in the sense of the background of the speakers we have. But at the same time, as mentioned, the environmental struggle is, in a way, one struggle, right? It is one struggle to save the global environment. And for that reason, we have to talk about these connections as well. So I was wondering, like, when you hear each other talk, what would be the themes you find resonating with your experience? As you were talking, I was writing down all kinds of keywords related to, well, climate change naturally, but also displacement, resource struggles, participation issues, dual or overlapping effects of local power use and the outcomes of environmental problems. For example, we find a lot of these kinds of common themes, or at least common keywords. So it would be really interesting to hear, how do you relate to each other's experiences or comments in this panel? What are those things you find resonating with your experience, or something common to ground connected environmental movements? Maybe we can start with Julius this time, particularly as you began to talk about the issue of connections. And you might also have to leave in a minute, so let us make sure that you have this opportunity to talk. And if you want to say something concluding as well from your part, you're welcome to do that as well.
Thank you so much. So, in every struggle, there should be purpose, all right? And what the different themes allow us to do is to build purpose. It's to build purpose that speaks to the future we want now. And as someone who comes from or who has got an activism background, one of the things I've realized is that mobilization is a powerful tool. And the aspirations we speak about regarding the integrity of the environment, the health of ecosystems, regarding the safety of our climate system, regarding the importance of safeguarding the ozone, the aspirations we speak about regarding the importance of keeping well with nature, are aspirations that are governed differently with different frameworks at the global level, the multilateral level. And the reflection of that at the national level is exactly the same, where you would have one line ministry looking at the environment sector. Unfortunately, you would have another line ministry looking at agriculture, not necessarily keeping to the commitments of these shared aspirations. And so we live in a world where we have aspirations, but the governance system from the top to the bottom and vice versa is one that is not oriented to speak to these challenges in a coherent way. And the question then I would ask ourselves as people who are after change is, what connections can we build from the realization that we are affected by a governance regime that is constantly faulty at our local levels, at our regional levels, at our national levels, and at our global levels. And that then brings me to this one connection topic, the power of the people. And it's a very interesting one, because then at the end of the day, every constitution in the world says that sovereign power belongs to the people. While we are seeing all the political narratives being built around why we do not have the opportunity or why we should not act now, there is a narrative that we have that very unique moment to build, that we have the power to actually connect to make a difference. And I think that for me is very important for this one reason. There is always going to be public inertia. And public inertia, by public inertia, I mean there will always be a moment in our society where we feel it's not the right time to do something meaningful. It's not the right time to take care of the planet. It's not the right time to cut emissions. It's not the right time to think about progressive, just transitions. It's not the right time even to invest in reasonable public-private arrangements that have got benefit for the people. And I will be honest by saying this, there will never be the right time to make change in our own lives. If we are waiting for the right moment, all of us then are looking at a planet that is sinking, unfortunately. And I'm saying this because there has to therefore be a voice of difference. There has to therefore be a voice of reason that says, I stand alone, but I cannot be alone because I'm a drop in the ocean, but together we are the ocean. And we share narratives that connect each other. And therefore, my second take on the connections is, what are the public narratives that we can build to speak truth, to ignite or stir up hope, and importantly, to lay a pathway for each of us to co-create a future that we want now. And we have different capacities, I tell you. But the good thing is that the youthful population and the older generation has got the opportunity to partner in building solutions. And this becomes my last connection point, building solutions. So what do we take on in building solutions? What are the values that we want to live within? When I speak to my community members, they tell me we are constantly disturbed by climate change. Unfortunately, there are societies that are very comfortable, because if you attempt to touch a part of their convenience, then there'll be an outcry. So where is the justice and where is the fairness? So if you think about our consumerism nature, if you think about how we've an economic system that looks at incentivizing GDP, unfortunately not valuing environmental capital, environmental benefit, not valuing social benefit, then we have to start asking fundamental questions. And therefore we have, in my view, to connect research that speaks about building that common future that is safe, that is beneficial for the planet and the people, and connecting those pieces of research with champions and changing and transforming the policy and the political class mindset. And this takes time. And then also, since we don't have time, we need to build the demand for a public discourse. That means that we need to talk to more people to on board. So we need to demand for political change while accompanying political leaders and policymakers to actually make the right decisions, living on the basis of evidence.
Yeah, Neela, Johan, maybe you can continue.
It was nice that you brought up the voices of the local people and the indigenous people, and what I want to bring up is the voices are there, but they don't have the platforms to share their voice. They don't have the people who are listening to them, and if they are listening to them, they are not really listening. And what I feel big issues in Finland and with the Sápmi people is the lack of knowledge, and how most of the Finnish people don't really know that much about our culture. And it starts from the education in the school curriculum in Finland. There might be something about indigenous people, but it's 0 to none. There's almost more thought about American indigenous people than the indigenous people living in Finland. And all of this causes a huge lack of knowledge, and because of that, it's easy for the policymakers to disregard our voices, because we don't know enough of that. We cannot make decision on that. And of course, if they have the decision to not listen to us and extract our resources from our indigenous land, of course they will do it, because they get the money.
So when I hear the word or connect, so I've been into international platform, and when I came to Finland, I've heard about Sápmi community, which their tradition, way of life and livelihood connects to the Indonesian community way of life and livelihood. The same community had a long struggle for land rights, just like Indonesian community, that we had this struggle for land rights through African Commission on Human and People's Rights. Sápmi had it maybe in regional platform here in Europe as well, in the American system, whichever. I've had colleagues from Brazil and other South American countries that goes through the same issues, means that the struggle for environmental conservation and the guardianship for motherhood as direct connect to indigenous people. I've heard their stories, their experiences, the impact to climate change as very connected. And we have shared this. This reminds us that our actions need to be connected. We've connect our demand, and it has been loudly shared in so many platforms, including even at my regional platform. We've had regional climate action that we've issued demand. That those demand connect with the voices at the ground. The voices of indigenous people, the voices of local communities, the voice of the most marginalized, including people with disability. Those are the hard questions we need to ask ourselves. We've organized ourselves around the globe. We've organized ourselves. We've organized ourselves through so many platforms to give answers to what is happening. We've done a research. We bring forward our voices. There are a lot of challenges that we go through. So that one reminds us we need to have a common action, and we need to have a solution, a common solution that maybe reduce the heating waves that we've continued to experience in our motherland. Thank you.
I think, like our friend Julius pointed out, there is a very important necessity to create discussion platforms. Unfortunately, the latest years, you see not so much of the discussion platforms in many countries, not only in the continent. For example, we had, maybe people would like it or not, we had the European Social Forum, and even the World Social Forum is not going very well either. So the discussion platforms is necessity to collect the society's consciousness in one place, so they can address to the issue and share the expertise to go to the solution process. As much as the capitalism is growing in a global level, and the companies who are exploiting not only in Kurdistan but also in other countries, there is also need to create a new form of internationalism which can fight against these global issues. When I say there's a need for a new internationalism, not in the sense of coming together in online platforms only, but also platforms like we are having here. Because as much as you are organized and you are more connected, that much you are much stronger to raise your voice and expose a lot of the companies, hegemonic powers who are operating in different areas. But if we do not do that, and I think if the global problems will grow, because there will be no kind of reaction to that. So I think the problem is not like it's a local problem. It's a problem in Kurdistan, which is environmental, is not a problem which only exists in Kurdistan, but also existing in other areas of the world. Therefore, if the problem is global, then you need to come to the global platforms. Unfortunately, these global platforms are very weak, and they have been disappeared, and you can argue a lot why they have been disappeared. They have been influenced by monopolist companies who totally destroyed them. So the question is how it's going to be if we are going to have these platforms. And I think we have a lot of the tools, the digital platform tools, we have a lot of the expertise, we have a lot of the resources. But I think how we are going to collect it in a one place and create these connections which can address to everywhere, that's the biggest question. And I think we have much more opportunities than before.
Yes, thank you very much. When listening to your ideas, I get the sense that we are steadily moving towards the issue of organization. While I was not really talking about organization and resistance explicitly, it seems that this is the direction this discussion leads us. So let us talk about organization still for a while. As you noted, we have to create connections and forms of counterpower. You have referred to prevailing forms of power several times, and the need to create some kind of organization capable of resisting. And it indeed might be, as Hakan says, that the global platforms are getting weaker, so we need something instead. And it would be really interesting to hear about these kinds of, the kind of experiences you have about organizing, in the sense of how can you create an alternative organization, or what are the points of success in organizing against the existing forms of power, because these positive experiences also exist. We just sometimes forget to highlight them. This is, of course, not only a political organizing thing, but we'd have to be organizing an alternative society as well. So we need also ideas for alternative lifestyles and how to bring about a society which functions in a more sustainable way than the current one. So there are lots of questions and issues related to organization. So it would be really interesting to hear some more thoughts on these issues. Maybe we can again begin with Hakan.
So I'm going to give an example in our context, especially in Rojava, because we get a lot of these questions. You have so diverse society, not only Kurds in Rojava. You have Arabs, Chaldeans, Assyrians, Turkmens, Armenians, people who have different belief background and ethnic background. How did you manage to gather together in what we call today autonomous administration of Northeast Syria? So I think the important to address to that is that people are always looking for common grounds of discussions. And what is that? The common values. And in Kurdistan, there has been a lot of important discussion platforms, which has been a process of not only 1 month, but several months, several years, where people from different backgrounds came together and discussed what is the common problem. So in context of Kurdistan, the common problem is war, the common problem is racism, the common problem is fascism, the common problem is environmental issues, the women's liberation, for example. So as a result of these discussions, they managed to come to a constitutional agreement called the social contract of Rojava. And people are organizing themselves under this idea of constitutional social contract of Rojava, which is not based on creating power on each other, but which is much more based to involving yourself in decision-making process for the need of the society, not for the need of a company or monopolist companies. So there is no room for anybody to enter and say that I'm going to establish this for you and I'm going to do it alone. There is always something called we are going to do it together. But for that, you need to have a correct perspective of a paradigm, and the correct perspective of a paradigm which is not based on hierarchical structures. Unfortunately, we do have now in this world, the social relation is now very much based on hierarchical structures, which gives an open room for bigger, stronger actor to come and control the region. For example, assemblies in Kurdistan, Kurds are not the majority, actually. They are the minority because there are more people with different backgrounds. And these assemblies becomes a platforms where people are involved themselves in political discussions, in social discussions, environmental discussions, research discussion, academical discussions, which creates an filtration on how they can address to the problem. But unfortunately, now today, we believe that politics is something what politicians do, not the people. But we are saying the opposite. Politics is what people do. Those who are representing themselves in the parliament or the state, they have just administrative role to practice what the society has decided. And often we get this, it's very popular that people say politics is something dirty thing. And we believe in that, and we don't want to join in that. but it's actually the opposite. It's the society's job to becoming the actor in the discussions process and decision-making process to address not only to environmental issues, but also to other problems in the region. And because of that, we have managed to create a lot of cooperatives, for example, in Kurdistan. Because of that, people managed to make a blockage to the monopolist. Because of that, people managed to find their own research or establish their own research academies to how to solve, for example, a water problem, how to solve another type of energy problem. So I think the collective consciousness of the society, who are much more connected to the nature, not connected to the industrial mentality, has been crucial part of the organizing themselves in right direction, not in the direction of industrialism. But for that, of course, there is a need to become educated. That's why we have so many academies. We have academies for women's science, for example, called genealogy. We have academies where people are making discussion platforms how to create a new form of energy. We have academies who are making discussion how we can bring together all these forces which can be benefited for the society. But unfortunately, when you see a lot of the important organizations like, for example, trade unions, they don't address to these issues anymore. They address more like to the salary issues. Trade unions used to become a place where people could really organize themselves and address to this kind of issues which was benefiting for the society. But unfortunately, we don't see that anymore. Human rights problem, for example. This was also a very important place for the trade unions, but it's not the priority topic anymore, for example. Therefore, I think, like I said in the beginning, the consciousness to discuss a paradigm which is addressing to the society's needs, not the needs of a state, not of a need for a company or monopolist institution. This is what's important. Many people are telling us, why are you going away from the concept of state and focusing on democratic confederalism? Because we believe that state structures itself are the problem itself, not the solution itself. If Kurds had the state, they could not, that doesn't mean that they will solve the environmental problem. It doesn't mean that they will solve the problem of gender issue. It doesn't mean that they will, the democracy issue will be solved or other issues be solved. Because state itself has not constructed itself for the needs of the society itself at all. Look at the countries we are living in. I mentioned bombings of Kurdistan. I live in Sweden now. I grew up in Norway. Okay, we speak a lot about democracy in these countries, but each time, for example, there's an election process, nobody would like to speak about weapon export. The reality is that a lot of the weapons which is dropped on people there, which has also created the environmental crisis also together with this effect of this war, are the weapons from these countries. So we have to ask ourselves what kind of governments we are voting to. So I think Julius pointed to an important direction, the voice of the society. How can we make it to be heard outside? And that's by having these kind of discussion platforms actually.
So what we've done in terms of organizing ourselves is we've come up with organization or network that speak to the challenges that we are facing, especially the environmental challenges. to tackle it in a common way, putting our efforts together. And of course, we are able to bring forward the voices of people who are most marginalized, their experience, and even, their voice matters in those conversations. We have also tried to use research to document those experiences. We have shown our collective efforts for women have tried to weave back the damages that we've experienced from climate change. We've used our cultures, for example, to put those rebuilding process as an adaptive and resilient way to nurture our motherhood. So those are the common powers that we try to bring back and try to, despite being mostly affected by the impacts of climate change. I've talked about maybe standing in solidarity with one another, like what is happening in Pakistan and other countries. We've always tried to stand in solidarity with our comrades and even those countries that are getting into the impacts of climate change.
Thinking what to say. I'm just thinking what to say.
No pressure. If you don't want to talk, that's fine.
Maybe I can continue on the next one then.
Okay, that's fine. Let me now ask the audience if there's anyone here who wants to comment or ask something. If you want to pose a question, you can pose a question to the whole panel or to someone specifically. None? Oh, okay. Timo's there.
Hello, I'm Timo Kuronen from Siemenpuu Foundation, and I was touched with your Hakan's comment. You started to talk about the systemic change. There are around the world there are lots of examples of the similar organization that the Kurdish women, for example, have come up with their own cooperatives and governance systems, and maybe then I will put Siemenpuu. We have combined some of these southern examples in our website called Muutosvaihtoehdot, like change alternatives, but at the moment it's only in Finnish. But they are based on international books called Pluriverse, a post-development dictionary where there is over 100 different examples of this kind of alternatives. So we have translated some of the text from there, and then as well from the book of systemic alternatives. So there are lots of good examples. So and it's interesting that there are more of those examples coming from the southern countries, since the state apparatus has not been so strong than in the northern countries. So there have been more room for the produce or bring up the alternative system of governance and sharing the resources. Yeah. But I would ask from Hakan that what do you see that what are the chances to bring this kind of change to the capitalism nowadays? What are the avenues that people should go ahead with the changing the system?
That's a big question, but maybe you can take the challenge and answer.
Yes. I think there is already a search from the civil society, because they are experiencing the problems in Kurdistan also in their own country. And they are searching for a formula, what can be the solution model. And I think a lot of the experiences in Kurdistan can in some way, not maybe 100%, but some of it be implemented in their own countries to fight against capitalism. And one of them is to understand how we look at what is a state, form of state. Because when we think about freedom, democracy, we believe that it cannot be achieved without the state. But in Kurdistan, there is an examples of that. In terms of environmental issues, I believe that the consciousness there in Kurdistan to create an equal society and a form of new renewable energy in these areas can in some way become implemented in these countries. But unfortunately, there is a lot of different policies coming in and intervening to understand what is the purpose, because Julius said we have to have a purpose. So what is our purpose here? In Kurdistan, our purpose is to fight the fascism and establish something for the society. If it's about the environmental issue, for example, for the need of the society in Kurdistan is not necessarily the same here in Finland, for example. They have a very different need of agriculture situation there, and than we have here, because we have the necessary resources here in these countries, but we cannot use these resources to fight against a capitalist system. For example, I was in England. You have cooperatives there too. We speak about cooperatives, but England, Britain is a capitalist country. Despite that, we have cooperatives in Britain. They cannot be detached from the influence of capitalist monopoly. This is a very big problem. How can we detach from ourselves from the monopoly of capitalism, even if we are running cooperatives? So I think that the consciousness of the society, which is based on not on hierarchical relations, is the crucial part of implementing the same similarities here in Europe. We do have here hierarchical relations here in this country. We have to admit that. It's not that there is no other power who are not deciding over someone else. If someone is building nuclear plants somewhere, if the society doesn't want that, it is very difficult for the society to fight against. They have to make some lot of the protest. But in Kurdistan, it's not like that. The assemblies, they come together and they make the decision themselves. So these ideas needs to be implemented inside of the, if you want to say, political party, or if you want to say another type of institution which can have a better position to make the decision-making process. A lot of the things we have here in these countries is not decided by the people themselves. Yes, they are going to voting, but it's not decided by themselves. For example, have you yourself decided that you want to put a little bit extra money so the weapon can be exported to another country? No. You have not been in this process. So society needs to become more involved in the process of the decision making in that region or country or street or another place or city. But unfortunately, we don't see much of that. And of course, the conditions of war is a little bit different. Europe had to go through 2 world wars. And of course, it's very natural that people had to make their own kind of system to create a stable relations in their own country. But in Kurdistan, I think that what we have common here is that a lot of the problems here in Kurdistan can also be experienced also here in this country. For example, the problem on violence against women. It's not like it doesn't exist. Inequality against women doesn't exist in Europe, but it exists in southern continent. We do have, for example, equality laws here in this European continent. But can we say that a lot of these laws are fair? No. There is still, for example, low salary to the woman. We still have this kind of problems. But I think a lot of the problems is not addressed in the root of the problem in these countries. In Kurdistan, we do that because there is a lot of research, academical projects which is addressing to that. And we have, for example, proposed to fight against this equality between men and women. We have proposed to implement, like we have in Kurdistan. Also here in Europe, our assemblies have the similar thing. For example, we have co-chair system in every institutional organs. If it's a political party, if it's here in library, the administration of this library, if it is in another organ, we have a co-chair system. And we believe that it can be also an effective model, how we can overcome this problem. But unfortunately, we are living in a country where liberalism is very much effective in the mindset of people. For example, today, even now, here in this room, nobody believes that democracy can be achieved without a state. But we are managing to do that in Rojava, actually.
Maybe we are taking a bit surprising directions in this discussion, considering that we are talking about the environmental emergency. But perhaps these issues about the states and how we relate to states in resistance and organizing do have a lot to do with the issue. And I was thinking that maybe our indigenous panelists might have some reflections on this as well. So when we organize to address the environmental crisis and resist the powers causing these environmental issues, should we be thinking of changing the state's policy or making change despite the states, which what Hakan is essentially saying, if I get you right, that we should organize and create alternative ways of life despite the state's organization and sort of go beyond state thinking. Because this is something which seems almost self-evident, almost as given to most of European environmental organizations, that it's environmental policy on the state level you have to affect in order to create meaningful change. And just casting a bit of a challenge to this idea is surely interesting to the audience, I'm sure. So any reflections from either of you?
Yeah, like thinking about like our culture and like how it's been alive for hundreds of years, and we have had our livelihoods for hundreds of years, and what has come into the way of us practicing our livelihoods are the Western societies, and how they have colonized and assimilated us and made us feel that what we are doing is wrong. And we don't really have a say in those things, because there is, of course, the colonization or the colonial structures aren't there as much as they were 50 years ago. But there is still the colonial roots in there that are affecting to this day in all the decision making, in everything.
So in terms of climate emergencies, and we have felt the impact. We have seen flooding, we have seen cyclone, we've seen also drought lasting not only for a year, more than a year. And what the state has done is that there are more of international negotiation. And this international negotiation, they are looking into how they fit in terms of market modalities. We have seen state taking advantage and asking for financial. They've borrowed loans. So this means that they are putting more burden on us as indigenous people, or even and of course this one on top of what we already feeling in terms of climate crisis that we are feeling back at home. At the same time, the policies, including even disaster risk reduction, when the policy even at the country level does not consider our own indigenous knowledge and early warning system that we already, because in any case, the policies that the state should be using should capture or should take into consideration our needs. And that means that the early warning system should match with our needs, and it should be, in terms of evacuation, structural development, the state should be put forward a resilient structure. It rained in Kenya just for 2 weeks, and everywhere was complaining, was crying, and I was asking myself, where are the experts? Where are the think tanks of this country? They did not even look forward, like beyond 50 years, what could happen? That one, we are asking ourselves, how is the education system in those developing countries? Do the policies or do the state executive take that one into consideration, or they are just using our numbers to get loans, to put more burden on us, and not even looking internally about what they can, mobilize at the country level. So when we talk about indigenous people and how this impacts us, is that we've continued to build a lot of resilience. We've also continued to build this resilience of the environment. All these efforts, when the state are taking forward the ambitious plan to the international framework, again, they're not taking those good practice from indigenous people. So, and I appreciate, because when you are talking about mobilizing power, now those power, I appreciate that at some point, even at this level of European world, you continue to mobilize resources to support us at the grassroots level. And through non-governmental organizations or through our partners that we have here, we really appreciate, because this is one of the interconnectedness that we've demonstrated that we are all caring for our mother heart.
Thank you very much. Did I see someone raise a hand? Yeah, I did.
Thank you for opening up the discussion, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I take the point from my friend from Kurdistan, perhaps because I'm more aware of it because I have Kurds in my immediate family, about that we need to find ways to build change and build solidarity without the state, outside the state. And perhaps there is some excellent models and learning we can do from places like, looking at places like Kurdistan, because what I'm thinking of right now is that there's a struggle for what is the crisis. There's a struggle of crises and understanding the crisis of the world. Right now we have European Parliament elections here, and you hear very little about the environmental crisis right now. You hear more about war. You hear a lot about saving, cutting back on seniors' care, health care, education, and so on, because the state is in a debt crisis. And so what do we have money for? We have a lot of money for war, for sending weapons to Russia, to fight the Russians, and buying weapons from the Israelis to fight the Russians, and so on. And I'm not surprised that we don't speak up about the chemical weapons in Kurdistan, because that will irritate the Turks, who are our allies. We're supposed to work together with to beat the Russians. We're very terrified of the Russians because we think they're going to come across the border. And we're canceling human rights treaties that we've signed so that we can stop anybody. And we kept the border closed for half a year now here in Finland. So, the state is going in altogether a different way. They're not addressing the problem environmental crisis as an important crisis, the existential crisis of the whole human race. They're focused on war, and this is happening in other countries as well. That we think we have to win wars in order to save ourselves. And this is not the way to go. We have to stop the wars to save ourselves. And we can't even talk to Russians. If you go to Russia and attend an academic conference, you get blacklisted. It's gone to that extreme. And I think we have to have a lot of courage and determination and personal integrity to talk to people the way you're saying, beyond what the state wants us to do. The state wants us to focus on war and destruction and the arms industry right now, and is going in exactly the opposite direction and everything else. And the problem is that the state has funded a lot of the NGOs and a lot of the academics and so on who were very progressive on environment. And now they're cutting back their funds and their salaries and their jobs and so on. So we need to rebuild ourselves as a people and talk to each other. So we have some kind of a voice which is now muted by a state which is going in an absolutely wrong, destructive direction.
Okay, thank you for the comments. I didn't hear a question there, but we'll take it as just a comment from the audience. Anyone else? Yep.
Hello, my name is Riina. I work in a couple of environmental groups here in Finland. My question is to all of you, and that is, what are some of the things you have been disappointed about, or what are some of the things you wish for from environmental groups working specifically in Global North?
Okay, wishes from environmental groups in the Global North. Yeah, okay, Christine can begin this time.
What I've been disappointed about, and thank you, Lena, for your question, and what I've been disappointed of most is about dispossession of our land. When you dispossess indigenous people, their land, you've dispossessed everything. Land occupied a very central place to us in terms of custom, culture, spiritualism, and even livelihood. So that is one thing that I've been disappointed most. I've also been disappointed most when we try to bring forward our voices and we find that doors are closed. Even when we knock more, we are told that we are not sure if your name was fronted forward by someone we didn't know. And this is exactly what we are trying to bring forward. We are trying to it is all about our mother heart we care for. So when we were coming, we were looking for a common solution. It is not about the solution that when we are knocking for the door, it is not about ourselves. It is about collective answers and solution to the crisis that all of us are facing at the moment. So that is one thing other thing that I've been disappointed of. In terms of, I didn't get your second question. Maybe you can repeat a little bit. Our wishes, right?
Yeah. Wishes, yes.
So what we wish for is that our government in Africa, when they hear global north, they run more fast. They can approve emergency resources. So when you come in contact with them, ask them about the situation of those frontline environmental defenders and communities that has been impacted by colonial, reason, and again now impacted by climate change. What is their fate? Especially communities that had a struggle for land rights, decided in African Commission. That is one of our wish. Another wish is that can we have a better ground in terms of, not resourcing projects that have impact to our livelihood, to our land. If that is also my second wish, that because in Africa they have this mentality that they get money from states in global north, and this money can be, repaid back in through loans. And then I had my president last time talking about these international monetary agencies like IMF and the rest. My wish is also, could it be very inclusive in terms of governance, Yeah, because those are the levels that we are talking about, platforms that voices needs to be re-looked into. So we can start from there so that we don't battle with every burden of, this kind of money and resources given to maybe conservation agencies that has continued to take away our land in Africa, take away our communal land, because right now we have this mentality of conservation. And this conservation is carried out by big agencies from the global north. And this conservation has close interconnection with carbon credit. So we are lured for small jobs that we are not even sure of getting, because at the end of the day, it is indirect way of dispossess of our land as a community. So those are the things, those are my wish that I wish to bring forward.
Okay, thank you. Did the others want to reflect on this?
I feel like I don't want to criticize anything at this point, but what I wish for the different activists, to remember the indigenous voice and the indigenous perspectives. The indigenous people are really few, and indigenous activists are even less. So please, if you have the opportunity, give us the space to bring our problems forward, and be there on our side then.
Yes, I think most of the things I want to say, Christine pointed on that. What I wish is actually to see a lot of the organizations also to come to Kurdistan or other areas to see by themselves what's going on, than just hearing from manipulative social media or disinformation media. Instead of that, just come to the countries and make field work, make the necessary research work, and reflect it in these kind of discussion platforms, which I think it is also very important. And these discussion platforms needs to be enlarged. The forums or symposiums or different panels and different platforms. And I think a lot of the cooperatives and companies needs to be exposed, who are operating in these in the countries where they are destroying the environmental issue, the network. And that's why I think the necessity to make the correct research on the issue, it's very important in many institutions, like in the universities also. I don't know, I've not been studying in the university here, but how much of a lot of the things we are discussing is addressed in as a research, as a curriculum in the universities. I know that many people are making theses on the issue, but I think these theses are very important, where the research is much more of that. And I'm also disappointed that here that people feel themselves too much pacifized. I think people shouldn't do that. People should become more motivated to organize themselves. And I'm always saying that when you have the resources, when you have the opportunities, you can succeed one thing only if you want it. And I think we can succeed to organize ourselves. And I see here, especially here in Scandinavia, we have been traveling in other countries also, in Asia or Latin America. Here, there is too much atmosphere of demoralized, demotivated condition. And it's very difficult for people to go and show a reflex. And I'm very disappointed to see that, because before it wasn't like that. Like I also mentioned in my intervention, we had the European Social Forum where people were fighting over things they didn't agree, and it was good to see that. But now there is too much silence, and which we shouldn't have, because there is brutality which is going on, and many people are suffering from that.
Okay, let me just add one dimension to the issue of discrepancies between northern and southern environmental movements. Namely, when we talk about the context of the global north and the environmental movements functioning here, we think of environmental threats as something looming in the horizon, future threats. Whereas the conditions which you are describing here are in many cases conditions of what we would see as states of exception, displacement, conflicts, war, context of existing existing serious crises within which the environmental issues have to be addressed and navigated within these kinds of contexts. So I wonder, perhaps that is also something we should understand better related to these kind of conditions. What does environmental action mean for people who are currently displaced or who are under violent conflict, for example? So it has to be a different kind of organization, and the problems articulated in this context are surely articulated in a somewhat different way. So just to add one dimension, if you'd want to say something about that, that would be certainly also interesting. No?
I mean, what these actions means, I think that people would then feel that they are not left alone, because without any kind of actions and articulation and creating this platform, there will be a kind of condition of where people are losing hope, you know. So I think to keep up the hope, fight for the right and fight for the correction of what we are experiencing in each different context is very important. But this will be not effective. This will not be useless if it cannot be interconnected to each other. That's what I'm saying. It's important for many organizations to come to Kurdistan or Kenya or come to the land of other different indigenous people, and the actions needs to be common. We need to see the big picture. We cannot say that we only do actions for save the sea. We will only do actions to save the panda, but this is just a small part of the problem. We need to address to the whole big picture instead of address to the only one puzzle of the problem itself. And that's why, like I also said in the beginning, to address to the root of the problem, if it's not in a correct way, we will go to a wrong direction. And to keep up the hope for the fight, which is very crucial, because I think myself, hope is much more valuable more than anything else. And for that, the articulation and the connection between different movements is very important, and the common actions needs to be addressed together.
Okay, if there was nothing else on this, I would have to proceed to ask if you have any final words for closing of this panel discussion, because time is almost up, and it's customary to give the panelists the last word or the word of conclusion, the 1 minute slogan of what you want to say to the audience as a take-home message from this panel discussion. And after that, we'll have the representative of Elo Kapina to say a few words about future action in Finland, in Finnish, supposedly, but nevertheless, words of conclusion. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I feel like I've been just listening for a lot of time. I feel like I've also learned a lot, but like different perspectives. But I just want to thank you, all the fellow panelists, and the facilitator, and everyone who was organizing this event.
So my word to all of you is that first of all, let's continue with this spirit of bringing together the voices of people impacted by climate change, especially the frontline defenders. Such conversation should, if possible, should continue. Thank you for listening. I wish also to appreciate Chairman Poo for bringing me from my rural home. I would never imagine in my life that I will be bringing the voices of Africa, especially the voices of women and people with disability. So that is a great honor to me, that you are able to listen for the last 1 hour. So I appreciate so much for your, that kind of, yeah. So, and most importantly, I appreciate I've found this country to be, I wish I could have an extension to be more in Finland. So with those, thank you so much.
I'm very happy to be with the panelists from here, and hear the experience in their own context. I think the most important thing is to stop being silent. For me, being silent is also a form of accepting a lot of the things we say there is an injustice going on. There's a saying called silence is violence. So I think we shouldn't be silent. We should always search for the justice and truth, and demand it from all these organizations who are claiming that they are trying to do so. Like our friend mentioned that a lot of the NGOs are funded by the government. But how much are they really fighting for the justice in terms of climate issues and other issues is a very big question marks. And the moment you feel that there is an injustice, I think it's important to be not silenced. And I'm again saying thank you for the organizers and having the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you very much, everyone. Now, hold your applause for a minute. And
If you wish to, you could have one of these, just as a thank you, all of you, if you feel free to take. Thank you very much. I think one of the best how would I say, the best lessons I got today from you was that don't be silent and do kind of go out and be activist. And yes, that's what we do, and we hope to raise the Finnish people. Eli me yritämme nyt, I'm sorry, I'm swapping to Finnish, as I'm explaining about our new rebelling. Eli Elokapina on kadulla tässä tulossa kesäkuussa, eli meillä on storm warning englanniksi, mutta myrskyvaroitus alkamassa 7.6. Ja silloin toivon kaikkia suomalaisia, kaikkia Suomessa olevia kadulle kanssamme osoittamaan mieltä tai ainakin tukemaan mielenosoitukseen, joka on täysin rauhanomainen osa sitä mielenosoitusta. Ja meillä on tällä hetkellä menossa vielä mukaan myrskyvaroitukseen koulutukset eri puolilla Suomea. Muun muassa torstaina on Lintulahden katu 3 tekstintalolla Helsingissä, yksi näistä meidän tapahtumista, ja se on kello 19.30-21. 28.5. on 18-20 etänä sama myrskyvaroituskoulutus, joka antaa infoa. Ja sinne pääsee mukaan myös Tampereella sunnuntaina infoiltaan menemällä kello 10, jolloin saa tietää lisää tästä meidän tulevasta myrskyvaroituksesta. Eli me ollaan tuolla on muutama juliste, joissa näkyy nuo päivät, eli 7.6. Meitäkin luntaan täältä. Ja 7.11. meillä on jo isot kapinat, mutta sitten myöskin 25. ja 28. on tulossa todennäköisesti kapinaa. Ja nämä on vähän sille porrastettu, että mitä enemmän te tulette meidän mukaan kadulle ja osoitatte meidän kanssa mieltä ja osoitatte oikeasti tälle meidän toimivalle hallitukselle, että ilmastokriisiä ei saa ohittaa Suomessa, niin sitä enemmän me järjestämme näitä mielenosoituksia. Et sillä tavalla me tarvitaan teitä, että me saamme tulla näkyväksi, ja siihen haastan ihan kaikkia suomalaisia, ehkä siellä striimin takana, mutta tässä reaalissa ainakin. Ja semmoisesta sähköpostista pääsee ihan siis ilmoittautumaan suoraan, kun myrsky nousee.fi. Ja joka tapauksessa Elokapinan, eli Extension Rebellion Suomen Elokapinan kotisivulta löytyy kaikesta tästä lisäinformaatiota. Ja I'm very grateful for you to be here. I swap on the other side, so I'm not too much on the way. But that because we had an intention with the panel today that we would love to give more voices for those who have not been heard in our environmental issues. And I can hear that you seem to be at least pleased for giving to you the space to speak. And this is what we were looking for. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you so much for facilitating. It was very, very great to get the help from Siemenpuu, and it was very great to get help from Finnish Seamen's Mission. No, sorry, now I got the wrong. From the Finnish, give me the word. And you are working for the Evangelical Church, Lutheran Church, yeah, it's the Suomen lähetysseura suomeksi. I'm sorry, I'm not getting the English word because I have used it in Finnish so much. Yeah, the Finnish mission, yeah. But Suomen lähetysseura on ollut apuna. Kiitos, kiitos, thank you, thank you.
Thank you all panelists, thank you to the audience, and thank you also for Julius, who's absent. Maybe he hears us through the stream. I have no idea, but perhaps. Thanks again.